Amanda, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to just start by telling us a little bit about your early days as an entrepreneur and where it all began?
Yes. So I think the entrepreneurial spirit, I think I was fortunate enough to almost be born with. I was surrounded by entrepreneurial grandparents who
Yeah.
arrived in Australia post-Holocaust. So I come from a family background that I guess was very au fait with having their own businesses, starting businesses, growing businesses, having the ups and downs. So I was surrounded by the spirit from a young age. After university, worked for a Singaporean-based public company that was distributing and selling hardware in Australia. And I feel like whatever job I've ever had, I've always looked at that with an entrepreneurial lens. Even after I started Mimco, I didn't necessarily care more about my own business than I did about the businesses that I worked for other people in. It was the same sort of thinking and the same care. So I went from uni into IT and then had a fantastic learning experience there, and then was 26 years old, newly married, no children, and the company was they scaled up very quickly, and then I guess maybe for lack of a better word, blew up very quickly, but it was a fantastic place to learn a lot in. So, having worked hard for others, I decided I was going to give my own business a go. And that was very much how Mimco started. Me just deciding I'd had some good experience working for other people and thought I'm going to give it a go myself. And it was not more complicated than that. And I guess, as I said, having been surrounded by entrepreneurial grandparents, having my own business wasn't like a foreign idea. So, let's give it a go. Nothing to lose, not a lot of
So
commitments.
I'm really interested in why that particular business
Yeah,
was it an interest or
yeah.
a gap in the market or both? And then also, did you set out with big plans from the start or was it something else that motivated you?
So to the first question, I actually thought about doing oils before I went into accessories. I thought about bottling oils because I saw all these laboratories in Melbourne. And I felt like I didn't have enough affinity to oils. Fashion was always something I loved, and accessories was something I thought there was a gap in the market. Having just been in the workforce, I found it hard to find a bag. I remember walking into the ground floor of the Myer department store and not being able to find a bag to take to work. I found a
Yeah.
few sort of okay-ish suits, but bags I couldn't. And I've always felt an affinity to fashion and accessories. I'm not trained in the space, but it's just personal taste, hobby, passion. And I was always dressing up in my grandmother's wardrobes, playing with her handbags, scarves, clothes, whatever I could get my hands on, I was dressing up in and talking about. And so it just felt like something I knew what it should be like. So I just decided to start that category. Didn't even think of it as a category. It was literally just handbags. What was your second question? You said,
Was it around something that you were interested in or was it a gap in the market that you
oh,
identified? Yeah. And I guess the second part was around when you started it, was it something you intended to be, did you have a vision of something grand and a big exit, or was it something that you were just
no,
really interested in and wanted to be the master of your own destiny?
I still didn't think about the big exit when the big exit was happening. Till the day we exited, I still didn't. I worked from the beginning and through to exit as if there was no exit because I didn't start
Yeah.
it to exit and I didn't build it to exit. An exit opportunity presented, and then I became aware of what that could offer from a security and financial point of view. And then even
Yeah.
through the process of exiting, never assumed it was going to happen, always kept working every single day as if it wouldn't. And then post exit, still don't live and don't work as if I've had an exit. Like
Yeah.
it's just a function of I don't work for those results. I really
Yeah.
love what I do. I just really enjoy working and I enjoy the process and the journey, and those things are byproducts of all of that.
Yeah. So it was an outcome, it wasn't a goal.
Absolutely not.
And so, in terms of that being grounded, in terms of what your approach is to business and how you go about that, because it sounds like you're very much about the process and doing what you enjoy, and the success as it's perceived by others, perhaps,
Yeah.
it comes from doing what you do well. I'm sidetracking a little bit, but how do you define success then in terms of what you're trying to do in life and in business?
Yeah. I think that the answer to that question would probably be different by decade. I think that I'm a driven person, but I think as I'm 54 now, and
Yeah.
so I don't think my drive has changed, but my measure of being who I want to be and how I want to be has evolved. I think in the early stages of my career, in my 20s and 30s, I had a lot less ambition to be balanced between motherhood, family life, and work. If I allowed myself, I can just work endlessly. I really enjoy it, and I get stimulated, and I can focus. But now, if I was to do that and I don't anymore, I would feel unsuccessful. To answer the question about
Yep.
success, having that right now in life, I want that balance. That makes me feel successful when I'm passionate and into my work, when I'm passionate and into my health, well-being, fitness, making sure that I'm all the time on quality with family and not just ticking boxes, but being present and having rewarding relationships. The same with friends, the same with travel. So just having a much more holistic view, that to me is what I see as being successful now. And I don't think even success drove me in my 20s and 30s. It was like just a drive and a focus. It wasn't
Yeah.
like, I want to be that. I don't look at
Yeah.
other
Okay.
people or other things and go, I want to be that. It's just like driving
Yeah.
myself.
You sound very process oriented and enjoy the journey along the way. It's about that rather than specific outcomes.
My instinct is to say yes, but I seem to always get to the outcome. So subconsciously,
Yeah.
they're very present. It's probably not as fluid as what I present it to be,
Yeah.
but
Okay. Yeah.
that's certainly my disposition is fluidity and enjoying the journey. And
Oh,
then
that's
I
really
know it will
interesting.
come.
Yeah. If you do a good job and enjoy what you're doing and have got the right balance for the right time, and I think that's a really interesting point. The right mix of how you're living your life and where you're dedicating your time to at the right times,
Totally.
because it's not something I think a lot of people think of, that over the decade, that type of thing does change in terms of how you, and even in terms of how you define success. I know when I was younger, my definition of success is very different to what it is now.
Totally.
And I think that just comes with a whole bunch of life experience and changes in life as well. But not everyone thinks like that as well, though. It's
I
easy to
think
become very,
you become, yeah, but I actually think the byproduct of it is that you become more successful. Like I'm
hmm,
better at my work if you're talking purely work success.
yeah,
If I am balanced than when I'm just like in my 20s and 30s doing hours and hours of work
mhm,
gave me success. Whereas now it's not about the time at the computer, like less time at the computer, more time in the world, more time innovating, more time experimenting, living life
yeah,
actually makes me better at what I do at this
yeah,
stage.
okay. Yeah, that's interesting. In terms of Mimco, that would
Yeah.
go through that part of the journey next. Uh, you started the business. Did you take investors on as you went along, or was it just
Yeah, late, but very late at the near the like later half.
yeah? And
For
what was that
retail
experience?
rollout, for retail growth.
Yeah, okay, yeah. What was that experience like as you considered who to take on as
Yeah.
investors? And then even the next question after that is, I guess, when you did exit,
Yeah.
what was that thought process like? Let's start with the take on the investors to go to the next level. What would take me through the thought process there?
It was a very, firstly, we appointed a really good group, and particularly one individual who really understood me, a banking guy who really understood me. And
Yeah,
I think for raising money and taking on investors, when you're a creative slash commercial person, having people representing you who understand you and you can respect was probably the linchpin for me. Like
yeah.
when to talk, when not to talk, like that whole, I guess, capital raising experience was a
Mhm.
really steep and fabulous learning curve. It became obvious very quickly who the right type of people were and who the wrong type of person was. It wasn't big enough for anything institutional. It was clearly sort of small fund family office type profile, and it was clearly people that understood creativity and branding and marketing, because there were a lot of things that the brand did and didn't do that was really at the time. Now there's a lot more talk about brand building and the things that you do and the things that you don't do, when it's not just all about EBITDA, but it's also about building a brand and building value into that. And there were a lot of decisions that I had taken that were around that, and it took
Mhm.
people to understand that for that to make sense, because that was the journey to get it to growth.
Yeah.
At the time, for example, like having stores in shopping centres, it was like I hadn't rolled out shopping centres yet because I wanted to keep it independent. I mean, now shopping centres are a much greater representation of every brand, but at the time, shopping centres undermined the retail perception of a brand. So I hadn't yet
Okay.
gone down that. So I wanted to have a critical mass of stores before going down the path of shopping centres. And there were a lot of decisions that I had made that were based on retail experience and brand. So it was very quickly obvious what type of investors were suited to that type of investment.
Yeah. Because you want people to understand the bigger picture of the vision rather than number crunchers who are going to say, if we do this, it's going to X equals that.
Yeah,
It doesn't
which
quite
is,
work like that, does it?
it does. It does. That's another model though. That's not what
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm good at creating the intangible value that you can then build, you can sell to private equity and build that into
Yes.
something enormous. But I'm good at getting it from not existing to
Yeah.
something that has an emotional connection to people. And
Yeah. Okay.
building an emotional connection to the customer with the customer has got a whole lot of intangibles around it. It's very human. And so sometimes investors don't, some investors are interested in that and others aren't.
Yeah. And choosing that right partner from the investment point of view, presumably you got it right. How
Yes,
important was that to the
critical,
process? Yeah.
critical. Because as a creative, there's a lot of emotion and sometimes not irrational, but like there's gut as well, and you can undermine it, you can bash it down, you can there's ways to handle it. So I definitely had the right people at the table. There was no question
Yeah.
about that.
And that was your first experience in terms of capital raising, that sort of finance part of it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about once you've exited? What was I did read something somewhere from an interview you did that you said it was very matter of fact in terms of it was an exit. You weren't necessarily attached. I might be misquoting there, but
Yeah.
that was your sort of approach, which is different to many people because many people I talk to have quite an attachment to the business, and that is a whole separate psychological experience to go through the exit and what after you've created something. So I'm interested in that. Firstly, I've got that right. And secondly, what that process was right after you exited and that journey, that next few years.
So what I've always said about that is that the creativity is within me. So
Mm.
whether it's building Mimco, building AS, consulting, doing something community or philanthropic wise, that creative energy is within me. That can never be sold. Mimco was an extension of me, but nothing stops me from ever doing more of that. It doesn't have to be within that vehicle.
Okay.
And but I also think that I always had like my ego is not like my ego is not tied up to my businesses, I don't
Yeah.
think. So I listen to and read a lot about people who feel very lost after they sell.
Yeah.
And I didn't and don't. And then people will often say to me, how do you feel when you look at Mimco now? It looks different. And I'm like, I'm glad that it exists. I'm more than
Yeah.
anything, I'm happy that it's a part of Australian culture. And yet, of course, it should and does look different to how it would if I owned it because it's been owned by private equity, by
Yeah.
other bigger groups. It shouldn't look like it did when the founder owned it.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I've gone on to do things that have excited me and stimulated me and that I've learnt from. And it's my job to seek them out.
So following the exit, it sounds like a different process to what many people's is. And it sounds like it was more of you've done that, it's time for the next thing. Was it that type of thing, or was there a little break in between, I think, before you started the next phase?
I went on to do like the antithesis of what I had been doing. I went quite quickly into a large project for a public company. So working on a retail concept for them, and
Yeah.
I delved into their archives and interpreted their brand, and I put a small team together. After having a very large team, I put a small team together to put like a proposal to them for a retail rollout. And
Right.
I actually really enjoyed throwing myself into that. I really enjoyed it. But then as time moved on and I realized how slowly things move at a public company level,
Yeah.
I got itchy feet to get back into my own thing again, because I was like, okay, we know what it needs to look like. We know what this needs to be. Let's do it. And it was
Yeah.
taking a long time. And that was when I was like, I got itchy feet quite quickly, which was basically 5 years later, to start my own business again.
Did you have an earnout phase when you sold Mimco? How long were you tied
Minimal,
into the business
minimal
for?
earn out, but I had
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
not really,
Okay.
it wasn't about the earn out, it was about a non-compete. I didn't
Oh, you
feel,
didn't have to hang around after you sold the business. You weren't
no, that
involved
was a
in,
condition. That
which
was, yeah, which is
I think that's
unusual.
perfect. Yeah, it is
Yeah,
unusual, and I think it's good.
it would not have been appropriate at the time for me to stay working with private equity. I wouldn't have been good for them and they wouldn't have been good for
Yeah.
me. It was, I think, and it was a premise of the sale. Like it was something that we
Okay.
established very early on that I wouldn't go with it, which was also part of, I think that was quite a defining element in who the right buyers were, because they had to,
Yeah.
obviously there's a lot of people that would have been like, well, if we're not getting her with it, then what? But I knew the business could thrive because it was a model. It wasn't it looked a lot less structured than it was. Like there was a methodology,
Right.
there was a fantastic management team. I had a great design manager. We had built that in the prior 18 months. Like it was a
Yeah.
very strong team that went with the brand.
Yeah. That strikes me as being a particularly smart way of doing things, because the common theme that you hear from people when they've exited a business and they're tied in for X amount of time is they see things change, and it's extremely hard for founders to work within that structure for the next somewhere between 2 and 3 years often, as it becomes more bureaucratic and they're not involved and things are slower, all those different things. The more obvious thing to do, if it's possible, is to sell, move on as quickly as possible to whatever you want to do next. And it's better for the company taking the business to the next phase as well, because they can then implement the things that they want to implement. Not
I mean,
always the case, but
yeah. And that could be why I've got a different
yeah,
experience in terms of my feeling. It was mine and then it was theirs.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I've never thought about it that way. That could be why I've got a sort of a very different experience of selling, because I didn't have that icky end.
yeah. But
I
often
don't,
there's that level of resentment that ends up with the founders because they've had to stay there and watch things change, and they feel hamstrung. Their creative processes have turned upside, with all those types of things, where the most obvious thing to do is to make that exit as quick as and as seamless as possible. It's not always the way, because people want to structure things with earnouts to
and also
achieve
it's not
certain goals.
necessarily
But
the way to get the biggest number.
sure, yeah, yeah,
And that was a possibility for us. And to this day, maybe
okay,
we would have got a bigger number. But I guess my soul is not worth any.
yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah,
no
yeah,
number on my soul. So I knew it would not have worked.
yeah. Okay, that's really interesting, and I think a very wise thing to have done. Having talked to hundreds of people who have done these types of
Yeah.
deals, that is not particularly common.
Yeah.
And I think it would change the experience. And I think clearly in your case, it has for the better.
I think it's credit to my investors at the time, because that was an unusual, let's call it demand, or I
Right.
guess boundary that I put in place, that they didn't know that when they got on board. Didn't even discuss it. When they invested, we didn't discuss what would happen at exit and whether I would stay or not. So arguably, it gave them less on exit than they would have
Yeah.
otherwise got had I stuck around. But I remember in my mind thinking, they're all not going to leave with the cash and leave me here.
Yeah. That's fair enough for sure. Now tell me about the new business, which is started in, was it 2012?
Yeah, yeah.
And which I know of Mimco. I didn't know of
AS,
AESC. Yeah.
AS, yeah.
Okay. AESC. Tell me a little bit about that and the process and some of the lessons that you've taken across.
Yeah. So for people, very common that it's not yet well known, and that's by design. It's
Yeah.
been very organic and under the radar, but very much people that do know it often comment on the difference. Whereas for me, it's actually built with very much the same spirit and that emotional connection to the customer, and then filling a gap and doing it with a very intuitive guide to what people need, what people want. And it's really coming into its own now. It's feeling like it's part of the zeitgeist now because it's all locally, it's made in Melbourne, all the
Yeah.
products. So it's accessories again. It is, I guess I cherry picked the best parts of what I loved about Mimco, and I designed AESC around that a little bit. I loved being in the factories and making product. That was the part that I really enjoyed. I also really loved campaigns and retail, but making product was the thing that I was most feeling like doing in my next chapter. But I didn't want to travel from my family again as much. And I also didn't want to have to produce minimum production runs or go on sale. So one of the founding principles is not discounting, not going on sale, not producing more than we can sell.
Yeah.
I've got my own thing, not so much now because I've reconciled it all, but like consumption and producing, there's just so much stuff in the world. I didn't want to
Mhm.
go back into a model where I was just contributing to the stuff. So
Yep.
I've gone in at a higher price point, more premium, locally made, small batch runs, experimenting, like when it's a lean-based production model, which is I had read about the lean-based production model that Toyota uses, like about
Yep.
15 years ago, and I was like, I like that for accessories, so that you're producing small batches and it's based on demand rather than being based on forecasting. I think forecasting now is just, I think the world is just so different in terms of how people shop and consume and buy. I feel much more comfortable with producing based on demand rather than based on forecasting and guessing. So I set up my own production facility in Melbourne. It's an atelier. I bring in all of the leathers from a tannery in Italy and I do the design. I rolled out 4 stores, and then when COVID hit, I didn't re-sign leases and pivoted to a D2C online model
Yep.
with a single store that sits alongside the making. And those parts of it are quite different to Mimco, but the essence of the design, the connecting with the customers, the way the brand communicates, is all very similar in spirit. It's very much for independent free thinkers. It's based on like a private luxury. So it's like beautifully made. It's all about quality. It's not externally branded. And I really enjoy it. I really enjoy having the manufacturer, especially now. And I didn't even realize how much I would enjoy it, especially now with everything being so digital and on screen so much. I love the counterbalance that I've got a factory, and so I spend time at the work tables with my team making new patterns. It's always a mix of experimenting and production. So we design and create on the same run production line that we do our manufacturing. I've focused on one category. So with Mimco, I started with bags, but we went into jewelry, hair accessories, and other categories. At this stage with AESC, I've really stayed focused. I love the idea of experts in categories rather than trying to
Yep.
do lots of things, really just being very good and known for one.
Yep.
And it's a smaller team because I haven't rolled out the retail.
Yep.
I think,
When
yeah,
you say haven't, does that mean you're not going to, or that means that you're not at that point
I
yet?
a bit spotted with my wording. I'm
Uh,
feeling it again. I haven't for years, and
yeah.
I picked up the phone to a few agents recently where I've seen signs of like lease signs that I've liked, and I found myself looking at what's around. I'm feeling it again. I haven't
Right.
for quite a few years, but the product sells really well. Like when people see the product, touch the product, they buy it. And so
Yeah.
I think for all the work that I'm doing in design and production
Yeah.
and building the brand, it's probably going to be it's going to be the easy part now. And I know how to
Yeah.
do it. So I am now considering retail again.
I can see the level of excitement increase just as you started to talk about that. But
Yeah.
there's obviously something there where there's a spark
I
on that
think so.
particular topic, right?
Yeah, I think,
I'm fascinated by the part where you talked about the lack of external branding.
yeah,
And if no,
yeah,
I'm not personally big on brands or any of that sort of stuff. I'm fairly simple. But I do love the idea of that concept. What's your motivation for that versus having the big brand and and everything's trending and all that sort of hype versus there's something much more authentic about it sounds to me, and I'm no expert in this
Yeah.
field, that's for sure, that something that sounds much more authentic, much more being created for the right reasons, with the right intent,
Yep.
and just purely to make more things like you talked about before. Take us through the thought process on that in particular, the if part, the no brand on the external.
I think first and foremost, it represents my values in terms of what I want and what I like. I think that there's a market for brands that define the people that wear it, but there's another market for people who enjoy the finer things but have a confidence to enjoy something that their character is stronger than the thing that they're carrying and where the focus is on quality rather than the name. So that's the emotional side of it.
Mhm.
From a commercial side, I feel very confident with that place because it's not trend based and it's
Yeah,
not like you're hot and you're cold. You build a community of people who it's like it's mindset, it's a community, and that's global
yeah,
and it's not based as I said before, it's like it's more for free thinking people than people that want neither is better or worse, it's just a different type of
yeah,
community. It's people that feel probably confident with their own brand as I always think the customer is their own brand and then
yeah,
what I make accessorizes them or for them to curate for their own style and look, as opposed
yeah.
to them being defined by my product. Interestingly enough, the product, and that's the sign of good design, the product is recognizable now. Like people will say, oh,
Right.
it's an AS bag. Like it,
Yeah.
that
There's a
I love
distinct
that.
style to it. Okay. Yeah.
That to me, I'm really proud of that. Like I love the fact like that people are recognizing the aesthetic.
Yeah. Okay.
That's building a brand.
Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't require the name and such. It's about the design.
The design speaks for itself.
Yeah. Okay. That's very cool. What's next for the brand? Is it the retail side or what's the,
It is potentially, I'm deep diving on where we go at the moment with the digital. We have a really good online business and it's been built organically. So we haven't built with dependency on paid media, but I've started dipping my toe in that and I'm really thinking about what that looks like at the moment. Is the expansion opportunity via a clever way of using paid marketing now, like moving as a next phase into that and investing more into the production of more creative content for Meta
yeah.
and investing more in Google and now with all the AI tools that are coming to market constantly,
Yeah.
all of that is just changing rapidly. So I'm spending a lot of time listening, learning, reading, thinking about what that looks like for the brand because I think we're going into a period of like where paid media has been about the technical side of things and the algorithm, which it will still be about, but it's been about the technical management of paid media. I
Yeah.
actually think it's going to be the creative side of it. The creative content is going to be the aspect that can potentially build successful campaigns. And
Yeah.
if that's the case, that is something that we're quite good at in-house. And so maybe it's time to venture into that because we've always done our own creative content.
Yeah.
So I've always had the vision that we're a production house of product, content, experiences. I do experience events in my atelier.
Okay.
So it could be the right time to really go a bit harder with digital because we've got a good story to tell
Yeah.
and the what we do makes for good content and we're good at doing our own content and we have a founder story which translates in
Yeah.
good content. So it could be an interesting time to explore more than what I have.
Yeah. Okay.
I feel that digital marketing is at an inflection point at the moment. And so I'm thinking about that because if I go quickly down the retail path, I know what
Yeah.
that looks like, and it's an obvious thing to do, but I'm just making sure that I don't miss the boat on this digital inflection point.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. In terms of the retail space, what are the biggest changes that you've seen over the last 10, 20, even 30 years from when you first started in the industry to now? Because obviously it's a very different landscape in terms of product, but in terms of technologies and delivery and how people shop, all of those types of things. Or is it a matter of just you do what you do and
No, I would have to say, I think the biggest impact on retail, change to retail, has been the relationship between retail stores and online. And
yeah,
so part of that whole ecosystem where retail stores have, in some cases, become showrooms,
yeah,
like a feeder for online. We all do it. We see something in a store and then we look it up online, and then whether it's about for any number of reasons, for price, for convenience, we buy it online. So it's not necessarily the last point anymore. It's like it's
mhm,
part of a system, which I think in some ways can add to it, but it also can make it hard to measure as a standalone profit center, because sometimes
yeah,
retail can be a feeder to the digital sales, but then what are you measuring them separately, or do you measure it as a whole, what that relationship is? In fact, my husband and I were at Chadstone on the weekend because he wanted to go to the Canada Goose store, and we were looking at a few of those like showroom types retail stores, like vacuum. I don't think it was Dyson, it was another vacuum cleaner.
but that type of thing. Yeah,
You know, you see 8 products in an 80 square meter shop,
yeah,
and we're going, it's interesting, like what's the business model around
mm,
the relationship between that and online? And that's that retail shop in Chadstone is more of a showroom than it is assuming. Have they even got any stock there? Probably not.
yeah, yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it? So that type of delivery and that type of, I guess, system, marketing system, is that what you would call it? Is the biggest change
Probably.
that you've seen?
I think so. I think the biggest impact on retail I think there's a lot more retail, and I think it's so yes, I think the impact of online on retail, on physical bricks and mortar, has been enormous. I think big box retail is really interesting. I think like I
Mm,
certainly in the time that I've been in business, the transformation of department stores,
yeah,
like who you would never have thought the power that they had.
yeah. They were the cornerstone of retail many years ago, and I don't think young people probably, same as TV stations and that type of thing. Young people don't
They
probably appreciate that that was the cornerstone of media once, the
would
big
have
TV
no
station.
idea.
Same as the big department stores. That was the pinnacle.
And that there was so much cachet in being a stockist, and it was hard
Yeah, yeah.
to get in. It's other than the name, it's totally different. Like it's so I think certainly the retail landscape's changed a lot too.
What was the best advice you were ever given along the way? Actually, let me change that question. What was the best advice you were given in your first business? And what was the best advice you were given in
Okay,
your second business?
one that comes to mind for Mimco was I was having a coffee. I won't mention her name, but she is a very successful Australian entrepreneur who has probably Australia's best retail network of a high profile network of retail stores. Her and I were having a coffee in South Yarra one day, and she said, "Why don't you open some stores?" This was for Mimco. And at the time,
Mm,
I was only wholesaling. I was selling to lots of independent stores
yeah,
and to David Jones. And I still remember sitting having a coffee at this tiny table for two. She looked at me, she goes, "Why don't you open some shops?" So I would have to say,
yeah,
no, that I wasn't asking for the advice, but she just said, and that's planted a seed, and I rolled
yeah,
from there.
okay.
So whether that's advice or not, I would have to say that those would be turning point words. With ASK is an interesting advice one, because people have found from the beginning, like even though I started it that many years ago now,
Mm,
it's quite an unusual business model because it's manufacturing and it's digital and it's had stores. I would have to say the few people that I've spoken to along the way that have really understood it for
yeah,
what it is, because a lot of
yeah,
people say, "What? But there's only a certain you can't produce that much," or "Oh, but it's only bags." And most people see it in the conventional light of what it's not or
yeah,
what
yeah.
it can't be, because they think
Th- This is a very specific business that exists in your head because you understand the industry and what you're trying to do so well. This is not something that anyone else is going to go, oh, we're going to do that. That doesn't happen. This is your business model for you because of how you want to work. So I get that. So it's actually not many people who can probably give you advice or would give you advice on it because they don't see it in the same lens. Is that fair?
Yeah, but then some people who not just a personal choice thing, but some people who really get that idea. There's also a very compelling commercial proposition with this business. Like our
Yeah.
speed to market is
Yeah.
such a superpower for this
Yeah.
business. So many businesses could benefit so much from having a business that can turn things around in a matter of days from new product to production, that you can test
Right.
it and it's got margin. Like it's got so many strong commercial attributes, and not many people quite get that. A, because they
Yeah.
don't have the insight, but then every so often
Yeah.
somebody sees it and they're like, keep doing that. It's
Yeah. Okay.
it's ahead of its time a bit. Even Mimco was as well, but this one is even more. Because people think that limited production is a negative. It's actually a positive. And
Yeah.
people like speed to market is so powerful. I think the rare times that somebody who really gets it says, don't divert. Because in
Yeah.
most
Right.
cases, people are like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why aren't you doing it? It's more what I'm not doing as opposed to looking and
Yeah.
going, no, that's really switched on.
Okay. Well, why can you do that? What gives you that superpower?
AS, what gives AS the super?
Yes. Yeah.
Because
To be
we're
able to,
because we're vertical.
yeah.
We're
Okay.
vertical.
Yeah. And so specialized in terms of you just do that one category.
That's not why. It's because we're
No.
vertical.
Yeah.
Factories
Okay.
factories are more nimble than middlemen because they're not dependent. Like as long as I've got my leather, because what
Yeah.
I invest in as an entrepreneur is my raw materials. If I'll put it this way to you, I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't have my raw materials. My forecasting is in my raw materials, not my finished
Yeah.
goods. So
Yeah.
I
Okay.
turn things around quickly because I've got everything. I've got a certain period of cover that I
Yeah.
on
Okay.
for raw
Yeah.
materials, which gives me the ability to make finished goods very quickly,
Yeah.
and it gives me the ability to quickly pivot.
Okay. And you control the process,
And I control the process. Yeah,
the whole process.
yeah.
So what is that advice that someone's given you about this business? Is there anything that stands out?
Not
Like
to
people,
chat it, not because
not,
sometimes
okay.
you
Right.
question yourself when you're doing something that's so different. You're like, if I'm like,
Yeah.
we all, do you question yourself? Do you ever go, what am I doing? Like,
I think everyone goes
yeah,
through and thinks, am I doing this the best way? Is there a better way to
yeah,
do it? What? Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah. So just to keep on doing what you're doing is
yeah,
good
like
advice.
stick, because, yeah, exactly.
Stick to your
And it's
guns.
actually working because people are starting to really appreciate lean production, not going on
Mm,
sale, not discounting. There are a whole lot of things that people are starting to understand and value. It's
yeah.
more about value.
Just on that theme of advice, what would you say to somebody starting a business today? What would be the most important thing you could tell them to do?
Don't
Might be
start a business to start a business.
yeah, okay. Yeah.
I don't know, like I was actually talking to my son about this recently. I don't understand. Sometimes people want to start a business to start a business. If
Yeah.
you don't, that to me is like a byproduct of what you're going to do. I wouldn't do
Yeah.
it to start a business to think that you get more freedom or
Yes. Yeah.
don't start a business to start a business. That
Yeah.
like that will. I feel like even that thought it's like should be a red flag.
I think there's probably thousands of people out there wanting to start businesses for exactly that reason, who, if they just pause for a second and thought, what do you want to do and why, not just start a business, is the best advice they could get.
And then I would say there are
Mm,
so many businesses out there that need good people. And there is so much potential in adding value to a good business. Think
yeah.
hard before you start another one, because I think the world of businesses needs great people in them, and there's
Yeah.
plenty to be made in that position. You don't necessarily need to start a business.
Yeah. That mindset actually might explain why there's so many business failures, if you think that through, right? Because people are starting a business for the sake of starting a business, but there's so much missing from that puzzle when you do it that way, which probably explains a lot
I
if you
feel
think
like it's
about
the
it.
wrong way around, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. What about people in business that inspire you? Are there any that you look at and think, oh, wow, I really like the way they go? You mentioned Toyota as a business, but in terms of business people, are there any out there that you look at and admire the way they go about it?
Great question. My God, my head's full for a minute because I read and listen to so
Yeah.
nothing is no single person jumps to mind except to say that I'm an avid consumer of business type content. I listen to a
Yes.
lot. Recently, at the moment, I'm really intrigued by these entrepreneurs who have backed celebrities to build these, like the guy that has co-founded Skims with Kim Kardashian, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'll give you, there's two of them. And it's not as simple as like just being an entrepreneur and backing a celebrity. It's like even the people that have partnered with Hailey Bieber on that cosmetics brand Rode, where they've been able to, and this is just a very much in the moment thing, but I'm really interested in this crop of entrepreneurs who are independently, not part of a bigger mothership, building these
Yeah.
absolutely phenomenal vehicles very quickly,
Yeah.
utilizing a celebrity, but bringing their logistics and business and entrepreneurial nous to the table. I think it's a really interesting, I think it's intriguing me at the moment.
Yeah. There's a few of those people out there that have become that were celebrities that are actually now have created basically close to billion-dollar businesses
Totally.
themselves, whether it's a Reese Witherspoon, I think is one. I think
Yep.
Jessica Alba's another.
Yep.
Ryan Reynolds with gin. There's a
But
bunch of
there's
them.
always an entrepreneur that
Yeah,
has done it.
behind.
Yeah. And I think it's clever. You know how like business partnerships are often what the secret to success is? It's a type of partnership. And because marketing is such a linchpin and eyeballs and content is so important now, often the celebrities have that box ticked. And so Hailey Bieber's business, which is 3 years old, just had a $6 billion valuation.
Yeah.
3 years old, and they've got 10 products.
Yeah. Okay.
It's unheard of historically. Like it's so I think that's a really interesting space that I'm intrigued by at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. And when you say intrigued by, just from an interest perspective, because it's unique, or from an application that you can see.
Yeah, because I think a lot about I think about my own skills and
Yeah.
how to best apply my skills. And
Okay.
yeah, it's both personal interest and
Yeah.
intrigue as we all evolve, like what's the best way to apply our skills.
Yeah.
And I think I understand business and operation, but I certainly don't have the reach and exposure of a celebrity like Kim Kardashian or Hailey Bieber.
Yeah.
I've
It's
got,
similar with the White Lotus TV show with the
yeah,
dress. I forget the brand of dress
yeah,
or the designer. Not dissimilar in terms of that. It's really about fitting the brand in the right place with the right links, whether it's a TV show even, or the celebrity, which is all just exposure to bigger markets because they've got
yeah,
viewership in
totally,
effect, isn't it?
totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very interesting. Amanda, thanks very much for your time. This has been fantastic.
My pleasure. I
Um,
love chatting to you.
it's been really interesting, and I've loved it. We might have to have you on the show again in due course as you progress in the coming years. But thank you very much for your time. It's been fantastic.
My pleasure. Thanks for thinking of me.